Life had a way of flipping a man's world upside down when he least expected it. One second, I was cruising down the highway in my 18-wheeler, thinking about what to get my 3 kids for Christmas. The next, I was lying in a hospital bed with a shattered leg and a doctor telling me I'd need months of rehab. The crash was bad. A drunk driver had drifted into my lane, and by the time I saw the headlights swerving toward me, it was too late. The impact sent my truck skidding across the asphalt, flipping twice before landing in a ditch. I barely made it out alive. The paramedics told me later that if my seatbelt hadn't held, I wouldn't have made it at all. I woke up in the hospital with a metal rod in my leg, a dozen stitches across my forehead, and a prognosis that shattered everything I'd worked for. "It's going to be a long recovery," the doctor said, his voice neutral. "At least 6 months before you can even think about getting behind the wheel again." 6 months. I was the sole provider for my family. Trucking was my life. I spent years on the road, making sure Megan and the kids had everything they needed. Now, I was useless. And Megan, well, Megan didn't take the news well. At first, she played the role of the supportive wife. She held my hand in the hospital, made the right sympathetic noises. "Don't worry, baby. We'll get through this together." But I could see the cracks forming. Megan didn't sign up to be the breadwinner. She'd always enjoyed the comforts of my paycheck but never had to worry about making one herself. Now that I couldn't work, the responsibility fell on her. The sighs started first. Small, exasperated noises whenever I asked for help getting up or reaching something. Then came the eye rolls, the clipped responses when I asked how her day was. And finally, the insults. "You just sit on that couch all day," she snapped one evening, slamming a plate down in front of me. "Must be nice, huh? Getting to be waited on hand and foot while I work my ass off." I swallowed my pride. "I wish I could help more, Meg. You know I do." She scoffed. "Yeah, well, wishing doesn't put food on the table, does it?" I ignored it. Focused on healing. On being there for Ethan, Lily, and Noah. They were my reason for getting up every morning, for pushing through the pain of physical therapy. I told myself Megan was just stressed. That she'd come around. But soon, it wasn't just words. She stopped coming home some nights. Her late shifts turned into all-nighters. Her phone was always on silent, always face down on the table. One night, I asked her about it. "Who keeps texting you this late?" She laughed, shaking her head like I was some pathetic, paranoid idiot. "Oh my God, Ryan. Are you seriously that insecure?" I wasn't insecure. I was just paying attention. The first time I smelled cologne on her that wasn't mine, I told myself I was imagining things. The second time, I knew I wasn't. Rehabilitation was hell, but Megan's indifference was worse. Every day, I pushed through the grueling pain of physical therapy, determined to regain the strength in my leg. I wanted to walk again without a limp, to be the father my kids needed. But every milestone I reached, every small victory, was met with nothing from her but a bored expression. The late nights became later. Then, they became overnights. She barely tried to come up with excuses anymore. "It was a work event," she'd say with an exaggerated sigh. Or, "I crashed at Rachel's." "You're not the only one who's exhausted, Ryan." It didn't take a genius to know she was lying. One night, I decided to stop asking questions. Instead, I started paying attention. Her closet held new clothes, expensive clothes, ones she never used to wear. She suddenly had a gym membership, even though she never worked out a day in her life. And the best part? She had a new perfume. One I never bought her. One that stank of cheap, sugary sweetness, the kind meant to impress someone new. Still, I told myself I had no proof. Until the night she stopped pretending. I was tucking Noah into bed when I heard her laughter from the backyard. Laughter. Not the tired, bitter voice she used with me these days, but something light and playful. Flirty. Then, I heard him. A man's voice, laughing with her. My stomach dropped. Noah yawned, pulling his blankets up to his chin. Night, Dad. I smoothed his hair, trying to keep my voice steady. Night, buddy. As soon as I closed his door, I limped down the hallway, my heartbeat hammering in my ears. My crutches clicked against the floor as I made my way to the living room. The glass doors leading to the backyard were slightly open, letting in the faint scent of chlorine and cologne. I peeked through the blinds. And there she was. In our hot tub. With him. Megan straddled some guy, some smug-looking gym rat with a tribal tattoo snaking up his arm. Her head was thrown back in laughter, her hands trailing down his chest. His hands were all over her, gripping her waist like he owned her. My blood turned to ice. I could have handled an affair. Maybe. If she had hid it, if she had pretended to care, I could have told myself she was just weak, just selfish. But this? She wasn't sneaking around. She wasn't covering her tracks. She was doing this in my home, in my hot tub, while my kids were asleep inside. Like I was nothing. Like I didn't exist. I stepped onto the deck, my crutches hitting the wood with a dull thud. Megan. She barely glanced at me. Oh. You're still up. Still up. Still up. The guy stretched his arms lazily, like he wasn't half naked with my wife in my house. Yo, this is awkward. Should I leave? Megan smirked, twirling a strand of wet hair around her finger. Nah. Ryan was just heading back inside. Weren't you, Ryan? It took every ounce of control I had not to lunge at him. Not to grab him by his neck and throw him face first onto the concrete. But I wasn't going to win this fight by throwing punches. No, I needed to be smarter than that. So I played along. Yeah, I muttered, turning my back on them. Enjoy yourselves. And the moment I got inside, I set my plan in motion. I played my role well. For months, I let Megan believe she had won. That I was too weak, too broken to do anything about what she was doing. She didn't even try to hide it anymore. Sometimes she'd come home in the morning, wearing the same clothes from the night before, the scent of his cologne clinging to her like a stain. She barely looked at me. Barely spoke to the kids. She thought I was nothing. A useless, washed-up husband collecting dust on the couch. She had no idea who she was dealing with. The first thing I did was collect evidence. Megan was careless, sloppy, too caught up in her new life to cover her tracks. I went through her phone while she slept, forwarding every message to my email. She had entire conversations bragging about me. Ryan's such a loser. He just sits around like a wounded dog. I don't even care if he finds out anymore. I swear, once I get enough put away, I'm taking the kids and leaving. He can rot in that house by himself. Except she wasn't taking the kids. That was just something she told her boy toy. Because the second thing I discovered, she wasn't even taking care of them. I started noticing little things. Ethan and Lily wore the same clothes for days at a time. Noah's lunchbox came home untouched because there was nothing in it. They were hungry, tired, withdrawn. Did Mom feed you breakfast? I asked one morning, watching as Lily shoveled cereal into her mouth like she hadn't eaten in days. She hesitated, her little fingers tightening around the spoon. Mom said she forgot to buy groceries. Forgot. I checked our bank statements. Megan wasn't forgetting groceries. She was spending hundreds of dollars at hotels, bars, and high-end restaurants. She was starving my kids while she wined and dined her new boyfriend. That was when my plan shifted. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about saving my family. The next step. A lawyer. A damn good one. I took everything, texts, emails, bank statements, security footage of her sneaking that guy into our house while our kids were asleep, and put it all in a folder. When I handed it to my lawyer, he flipped through the pages, shaking his head. Jesus, Ryan. This is airtight. You realize you're not just looking at full custody, right? I frowned. What do you mean? He leaned back in his chair. With this kind of evidence, your wife isn't just losing her kids. She could lose everything. The house. Spousal support. Hell, she might even face fraud charges for the money she's been siphoning into that private account. Private account? He turned the folder around, pointing at a transaction I hadn't noticed before. Megan had been funneling our money into a separate account for months. She was planning to leave. The second she had enough saved, she was gone. And she wasn't going to take the kids. She was going to take everything else. She thought I was weak. She thought I would lie down and let her walk away with my money, my house, my dignity. She had no idea I was about to destroy her. The courthouse smelled like old books and bad coffee. I sat at the plaintiff's table, my hands resting on the cold wood, my lawyer seated beside me. Megan was across the aisle, her expensive heels tapping against the floor. She walked in with her head high, her blonde hair perfectly styled, a confident smirk on her face. She actually believed she was going to win. Her boyfriend wasn't with her. Of course, he wasn't. He had no reason to be. She wasn't his problem, not yet. Megan's lawyer, a weaselly man in an overpriced suit, stood first. Your Honor, my client, Mrs. Carter, has been the sole provider for this family for nearly a year. Mr. Carter's accident, while unfortunate, left him unable to contribute financially. Due to this, we request full custody of the children, ownership of the marital home, and a portion of Mr. Carter's remaining assets to compensate for lost wages. I didn't react. I let her dig her own grave. The judge, an older man with sharp eyes, turned to my lawyer. Ms. Lawson, do you have a response? My lawyer, a woman who had seen way too many men like me get screwed over in court, stood and smiled. Actually, Your Honor, we have some new evidence to present. She handed over the thick stack of documents I had spent months collecting. The judge's face darkened as he flipped through the pages. Megan's confident smirk wavered. The judge looked up, fixing his gaze on her. Mrs. Carter, are you aware that attempting to hide marital assets is illegal? Her mouth opened, then shut. He turned another page. And this. He held up a still image from the security footage, Megan in my hot tub, straddling her boyfriend, her hands tangled in his hair. This is your lover. In your marital home? With your children present? Megan paled. Her lawyer coughed, clearly realizing this was about to go very, very badly. Your Honor, my client. Save it. The judge dropped the stack of papers onto his desk with a thud. I see multiple instances of child neglect. Financial misconduct. Adultery. And the attempted removal of shared funds into a private account. He turned to me. Mr. Carter, do you have anything to say? I met Megan's panicked gaze. She was begging me to save her. To say something, anything, that would make this go away. I said the only thing that mattered. I just want my kids to be safe. The judge nodded. The gavel came down. Full custody awarded to me. House awarded to me. Megan got nothing. The second we stepped outside the courthouse, Megan exploded. You bastard, she shrieked, storming toward me in her high heels, her manicured nails curling into fists. You set me up. You planned this from the start, didn't you? I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I just looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in months. Her makeup, once perfect, was now smeared with sweat. Her eyes, once full of arrogance, now brimmed with panic. She wasn't furious because she lost me. She was furious because she lost everything. I let the silence stretch between us before answering. No, Megan. You did this to yourself. She opened her mouth to argue, but before she could get another word out, her phone rang. She yanked it from her purse, probably expecting her boyfriend to swoop in and comfort her. But the second she saw the screen, her whole body stiffened. I didn't need to hear the conversation to know what was happening. I already knew. See, Megan's boyfriend, the smarmy gym rat she threw her marriage away for. He wasn't in love with her. He was in love with what she could give him. The money. The house. The free vacations. The excitement of sleeping with a married woman, knowing she had everything to lose and he had nothing at stake. But now. Now she had nothing. And the second she lost the house, the credit cards, the comfortable life she thought she could take from me, he dropped her like a bad habit. I watched as her face crumbled, as she turned away from me, whispering frantically into the phone. No, wait, Nick, please, let's talk about this. I can figure something out. The line went dead. She lowered the phone slowly, like she couldn't believe it. Like, for the first time, it actually hit her. She was alone. For the first time in years, I saw something real in her eyes. Not arrogance. Not contempt. Fear. Turns out, when you abandon your family and try to scam the system, word gets around. Within days, Megan's life fell apart. Her boss, who had been completely unaware that she was funneling money from our joint account into a private stash, suddenly found himself very aware after my lawyer submitted her financial records as evidence in court. She was fired for ethical concerns. Her so-called friends, the ones she used to go out with, spend money with, they stopped returning her calls. She had nowhere to go. I heard she spent a few weeks couch surfing, begging anyone who would listen for a place to crash. But the funny thing about karma? It doesn't care about excuses. A month later, she called me. Her voice was different this time. No smugness. No attitude. Just desperation. Ryan, she whispered, sniffling into the receiver. I made a mistake. I let the silence stretch. I was overwhelmed, she continued, voice cracking. I didn't mean for things to go this far. Can we at least talk? Talk. Where was this Megan when I begged her to be a wife? A mother? Where was this Megan when she was laughing in my face, rubbing her affair in my nose? I let her sit in silence for a long moment before replying. No, Megan. We have nothing to talk about. I hung up. I took my kids home. We repainted the walls. Rearranged the furniture. Erased every trace of her. For the first time in years, my kids were safe. They were happy. And as I stood in the doorway, watching them laugh, watching them heal, I realized. I won.